Hello, and welcome to this video where myself, Tyler, and then this is Joe. Say hello.
Hello.
Yeah, big ups, fam. We're gonna be doing this video where we are ranking the Beatles discography. Whoa, is that a Beatles disc, bro?
Well, it is, you guys. It's
Is that
crazy.
is that the
Here.
best-selling album in England every year since the year it was
Well,
released?
you guys, that's a fun fact that I just learned from Tyler like 5 minutes ago. But yes,
It's
it
a
is.
fact that I saw in a YouTube video about an hour ago.
Oh, wow.
Nito Cheeto. Well, welcome to the video. You're in for the long haul now, so you better cozy up with a blanket.
You
Give
might
us
as well just
that.
hit that like button. Just get out of the way.
Yep, yep. Be sure to leave a comment down below for us to know your gamer tag, so we can add you on Xbox Live. And we're gonna get right into a little bit of the meat of this video. Um, So, the Beatles. I won't give too much information about the Beatles. This is a band who everybody knows, especially if you're watching this video. If you have the interest to sit through however long this video will be, you're probably somewhat aware of the Beatles. You can tell that Joe is aware of the Beatles given his paraphernalia there.
Yeah,
Um,
so you can already see my merch. I've got the best-selling disc in England every year since every year is released, and then this, well, you can't really see it, but now you can see it. It's the men, these gentlemen walking across the street, just kind of lit.
mhm. Six shoes on.
Yep.
Mhm.
Paul is dead.
So here you have a band that hails from Liverpool. Perfect accent execution. And the members of this band happen to be John Lennon, and it might be Jonathan Lennon. Haven't looked at the birth certificate. Then you have Paul McCartney, and then you have George Harrison. And then after a few trying out a few drummers, they land on this guy who's called Ringo Starr, who I recently learned his name's like Richard Scatcher or something. It's his real. I don't remember, but his stage name is Ringo Starr. The Beatles is a highly influential band. Um, it's often said that a lot of the music that we know and love today, uh, you'd be hard pressed to figure out how that stuff might exist if the Beatles never did exist. Not the Beagles. That's probably a different band. The Beatles. The Beatles. Um, Now, this is interesting because things like Sergeant Pepper came out, which a lot of people see as kind of the first progressive rock album. Very interesting. It's that's just like one example of the influence that the Beatles went on to have, and pretty much every artist to some degree cites the Beatles as an important influence in their music, and even if they don't, the Beatles influence their influences. Crucial band, absolutely crucial. Obviously, me and Joe are the absolute authority on this subject, and that's why we're making this video, of course. And that's why all of you came. Is because after watching this video, you'll be emailed a PhD certificate that is official, but it might not be like necessarily recognized by too many institutions, but it will be official as far as it is a certificate of authenticity on this PhD that you'll be receiving after this video. Um, so be sure to like this video down below as a thank you for this free education that we're actually providing you as a service. You'll notice that there's not monetization on this video. Given that we have such a massive audience, that's probably surprising to some of you. But to those of you who've been following the channel for a while, our charitable hearts. We really just give these discography ranking videos out yeah, go ahead and pat yourself on the back. That's
Oh,
right,
well, you pat
Joe.
yourself on the back as well. I mean, we do this for you guys. Like, this is our gift to you, so you're welcome.
So be sure to leave a like on the video, and I'd be surprised if you're not already subscribed, but you know, please do that. So let's move on to talk about Beatlemania. We were talking about the Beatles' influence in pop culture, music history, things like this, and Beatlemania. They really went crazy whenever they came to America. They had this Ed Sullivan performance. Not sure if you've ever heard of it. It's only one of the most viewed television programs of all time. Um, pretty much everyone that's like my grandma's age and Joe's grandma's age, their ovaries exploded whenever this thing took place. That it's a very interesting time in America where the Beatles just absolutely invade. Okay, so this is a band that over the course of their career, they continued to innovate and evolve their sound. And so they kept kind of pushing themselves to do more interesting and new musical things. And so throughout their discography, especially if you go kind of in order, you get to see their progression of kind of like what they were thinking, how their songwriting has changed over time, and kind of like the personalities shaping of these gentlemen as they kind of came of age while in the Beatles. So they're fairly young guys when they started out, and of course, this intro really is not necessary because, of course, John Lennon said that the band is more famous than Jesus. And so, of course, if you're taking communion, Jesus said, "Do this in remembrance of me." So, whenever you're like eating of the bread and taking of the cup, you could just be like, why don't we do it in the road? You know? So, Joe, let's hear you talk since I've been, kind of rambling on with this endless drivel. What is your kind of, how did you come to know the Beatles? What's your first interaction with the band? Yeah, go.
Yeah, so I actually don't know my like first initial interaction with the Beatles because I've always kind of known them. I've kind of known who they are. I will say the first song I ever learned how to play on bass guitar is All My Lovin'. And so bass guitar is the instrument I play most. And my dad was playing acoustic guitar and singing, and I was playing bass, and I was actually learning how to play, and my fingers weren't strong enough to actually pluck the strings, so I was using a pick badly. Anyway, I was learning how to play bass, and this is the first time I ever actually learned how to play, so it was super exciting. And we played it really slow, and my dad sang, and it was like really sweet. And I didn't know the actual song that the Beatles made, so when I finally heard that song and found out that it's faster, I was almost a little disappointed because I liked our slow version of the song more, which is funny. But I really got into the Beatles from my dad and from my grandparents. I have tons of old Beatles records that my grandparents were nice enough to give me. So you'll hear a lot about those and hear a lot of my grandparents in this video. But that's cool because I'm really glad my grandparents, they gave me all this stuff. Trying to look at my notes here, see what else I have to say about this. So my dad grew up listening to Paul McCartney and Wings in the 70s when he was a kid, and was almost more of a Wings fan than a Beatles fan. So he got me into some of the Paul McCartney stuff. And then I got to a point where I was going through like, famous albums like, Abbey Road and Sgt. Pepper's, and I was really liking some of these. So I was going to Half Price Books, buying CDs, and kind of got into some of it on my own. But yeah, also I'll say I think some of my opinions are going to be wildly different than most people. I also happen to really like some of the early Beatles albums, and yeah, we'll talk more about that later. And yeah, so those are my thoughts, kind of how I got into the Beatles and how that's kind of influenced and shaped me.
Great. Thank you, Joe. For me, my first interaction with the Beatles was, um, there was a Beatles song that came on the radio, and my dad said that he didn't like the Beatles. And I was like, oh, who's the Beatles? And I kind of didn't give it much thought. And then the next thing that I remember anyway, in terms of my interaction with the Beatles was, I remember watching the show Drake and Josh as a boy. And there is an episode about, or there's an episode, and I don't actually remember very well, where Drake talks about having Abbey Road, the album by the Beatles.
That's
And
awesome. Sorry, I'm familiar with Jake and Josh, but I'm not familiar with that episode. So that's really cool.
yeah, there's an episode. I also think there's a poster on his wall of
Yeah.
it. And so, that's kind of the next thing. And I remembered being like, okay, Abbey Road by the Beatles. I remember my dad said he didn't like the Beatles. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe my dad still doesn't like the Beatles. I haven't asked him recently, but that's something that I remember. Um, and so I listened to Abbey Road, and I thought that album was very cool. I listened to the whole album when I was in like fifth grade or so, maybe. Come Together is on that. Here Comes the Sun is on, like, these songs that I've actually heard before, but I didn't know were the Beatles. And, of course, Come Together is such a cool song when it comes to the drumming part. It's just like really neat. And I've always been drawn to drums, and now I, of course, play. And so, that was kind of a cool, like, initial interaction. And but kind of from that time I didn't really look into the other Beatles stuff all too much, and I kind of thought of them as like a weird hippie band, because of like some of the Yellow Submarine imagery that I saw when I was like on iTunes looking around at their stuff. And so I didn't really care to check it out. I just kind of cared that it was on Drake and Josh. um but I think I probably got into the albums more so when the Beatles Rock Band came out, because of course I got that game. And in that game, I believe it's 3 full albums are actually in the game, and I was like, "Wow, these albums are cool." And so, you know, my opinions about Beatles albums and songs have changed. And I would say at this point in my life, I have the most respect for the Beatles that I've ever had. Because in the past, I used to kind of think some of it was good and some of it was not too good for just various reasons. Given a certain album, I would either like it or not like it. But as time has gone on, I have a bit more respect for the band than I've ever had. And, probably throughout my life, I'll continue to listen to the Beatles and learn things about the Beatles and just be interested in the topic, because really, the Beatles is like something that you could make a class about and really learn a lot of interesting kind of music history info from. And so yeah, that's kind of me. Let's from for now take a look at our graphic. Okay, as you can see here on the graphic, we have all of the albums listed out there on the top. Those will stay there during the whole video, so you can just kind of see what year different things came out. And down there on the bottom, those are the ones that I will be moving on to the chart in order to rank them. And so, um, of course, we're going to go from worst to best, and then we're just going to kind of talk about why we put these albums in those particular places. And so, I suppose I'll put mine on the list first. So this is my least favorite Beatles album, and it happens to be Beatles for Sale. So Joe, what is it for you?
So my least favorite Beatles album is, everyone's gonna hate me for this. My least favorite Beatles album is the White Album.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's probably one that's a little spicier to say. The Beatles for Sale is
Beatles for Sale is not a hot take to put low. What White Album
yeah.
is,
Why?
unfortunately.
Yeah, a lot of people really dig that one. It's like, so Beatles for Sale, I would say, is the Beatles album that kind of has the least identity for me. It's kind of them like whenever they just first start really trying to write very interesting or music. Because before they kind of were like a rock and roll party kind of band, um, which obviously I like those 3 albums that came before it a little better than I do Beatles for Sale. Um, However, Beatles for Sale is definitely a good album. I would say that some of the rock and roll type stuff, like the covers that they do, I'm not as big of a fan of. I just don't think it's as great or important to me. But there's definitely some songs on this album that I really do think are important or that I care about quite a bit. Of course, 8 days a week, you really can't do without it. I'll Follow the Sun. I think that song has like a very cool melody that you definitely don't hear in a lot of music. Kind of just a strange sounding melody that's very beautiful, and I just like that song. I think it's a nice. It's got nice lyrics. It's one of my favorites on the album anyway. And of course, I'm a Loser is funny. I dig that song. No Reply definitely kind of sounds super classic. Like when you put this album on and you have No Reply playing, it's just it's kind of like a legendary sounding song, you know. So that's definitely cool. And I would say this album as a whole, it's that classic Beatles sound. It's just the Beatles album with kind of the weakest identity, and that's why it's the lowest on my list. I will. This is, I guess, where I will say I genuinely do like every Beatles album. There's not one that I dislike.
Good.
That's not always true for the discography rankings that we do for other bands, you know. But for the Beatles, every single one. And so, why don't you talk about White Album?
And that's great because I know other people put like Beatles or Beatles for Sale, or I don't know what's another one people don't like, but like the fact that even the one you put last is one you like. So for me, the White Album is it's one I don't like very much, but I don't hate it. And I it's funny we both talked about learning more, understanding the influence, and really digging into more of these albums. I used to hate this album, but I don't hate it anymore. And I want to start with some things that I really like on it. So you've got the first two, and keep in mind there's like 30 songs, but I'll try to get a few highlights and things I like. The first two songs, Back in the USSR and Prudence, I really like both of those. And remember, for me, in terms of like album flow, it's not just about having a good opening track, it's about having two good opening tracks, is that 1-2 punch. And I think both these songs really they set up the album really well. And you also got, oh gosh, what are the others? Again, there's like 30 songs. I'm trying to dig through all my notes here, but there's good stuff. Happiness is a Warm Gun. I like that song a lot. And apparently, I didn't know this. I found out recently. Apparently, Radiohead, when they made Paranoid Android, they wanted to make a song similar to Happiness is a Warm Gun, which I think is kind of funny and kind of cool. What else? Everybody's got something to hide except for me and my monkey. That's a mouthful, but that song's crazy. That song's good. And then you've got I don't know if you remember, Tyler, but Savoy Truffle is one that Tyler got me into way back a few years ago, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And then of course, Eric Clapton solo on While My Guitar Gently Weeps. I mean, it's Eric Clapton. You got to give it to him. Okay, so a lot of the songs on this album, they're really stripped back, and it's to the point where there's almost nothing there. And I know, and I have a better understanding now of again, of people, or why people like this album, where it's like they like the tension of the Beatles, all fighting and not getting along, and Ringo quitting the band. And I get that, but I just don't think a lot of the songs are that interesting. And you know, I mean, this album it's a mess, and that's the point. But like, this is an hour and a half. Like this is way this is way too long. And there's a few handful of songs that I really like, but man, you really gotta dig for it. And again, I want to be honest. I don't hate this album. I think there's a lot. Well, maybe not a lot. There's some really good stuff in the highlights there. Like like Dear Prudence, I think might be my favorite one. Really good. But the other thing about, you get so far in this album and it's kind of unsettling. Like it's creepy, but like you get other albums that are really unsettling or kind of mess with your emotions, like in a good way. But this, it kind of hits me in like a bad way, I guess. It's just kind of uncomfortable. So I'm not going to go through every song, of course, but like that's why I wanted to pick out the ones that I really like, the highlights on this album. One, to try and appease the angry people in the YouTube comment section, but also say there are legit songs I really like on here. This album's just kind of not for me, I guess, as a whole. There are two songs that I will mention. Wild Honey Pie. I think this song is trash. I think it's my least favorite Beatles song. There, I said it. And the other one, honestly, is another one I used to hate, but I don't hate anymore. Again, Revolution 9, number 9, number 9. I like, again, I get why people like this song, and I get the whole sound collage thing, but again, I just don't think it's that interesting. It's just not for me. So yeah, I think kind of my hope with this album, that I keep finding things that I like about it, because that's kind of where but yeah, that's where it is right now. Oh, also, I forgot to show you, we show our discs. So I have, ready? Because it's two discs, see? And I got this from my dad. So it has two discs. So that's cool. All right. Yeah,
Very
that's it.
cool. Very cool. Yeah. I think that if you're just talking about the Beatles albums as albums, the White Album is absolutely the worst. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the one that I enjoy the least. But certainly it's a bloated kind of disaster. in many ways that has highlights. I think that's a pretty fair way of describing it, and I don't think that would be that opinion would be too controversial. Um, yeah, like you mentioned, Savoy Truffle. That's been one of my very favorite Beatles songs for a very long time.
Yeah, and I remember, so for context, Tyler and I, we were in school and we were living in the same house, and we were talking records and music and all this stuff. And I mentioned something about the White Album, and Tyler's like, "Dude, do you know Savoy Truffle?" And I was like, I don't really remember." And he like turned it on and played it. He's like, "Listen to this." I'm like, "Yeah, that's pretty good."
For me, it's just a very underrated, really
Good
good
one.
song. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one more thing I wanted to mention to you in particular. So everyone else watching this video, who cares? This is just for Joe. That song you mentioned, "Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except for Me and My Monkey." That's an extremely good song. You should hear Soundgarden's cover.
I did not know there was a Soundgarden cover, and now I'm intrigued.
Yeah,
That's
maybe
something I should know. What the heck?
maybe some of the people watching this video care, but I know you will care, so I will tell
I
you.
care a lot about that. All
Yeah,
right, I got my homework assignment after we finish recording in like 5 hours.
yeah. Okay, well, let's do the next one on the list. For me, it's "With the Beatles."
Ooh, that is my next one as well. Hey,
Oh,
this is gonna be this might be the one, maybe two, but probably just one where we actually agree on something.
yeah, just maybe. Yeah, that's funny. So it's like, yeah, I mean, maybe I'll start. I think that this album is, it seems to be a bit rushed. It seems like, when I listen to this album, I think, the songwriting here isn't all that terrific. And it seems like they were kind of hurried along to get this thing out. Because "Please Please Me," of course, is an album that we'll talk about later. I don't want to say too much in detail, but that's basically an album full of stuff that they're just extremely good at doing, and they've been doing it live for years. And after they came out with that album, then they're like, "Okay, here, write some songs and do it quickly." And so "With the Beatles" comes out. And so, in my opinion, I think that this particular Beatles album, while it has what I would say is like more classic Beatles songs on it, like "It Won't Be Long," "All My Loving," one you talked about earlier, like "Please Mr. Postman," like there's just so many like really classic songs, like um but a lot of the songwriting is just not up to what the Beatles can do. And that's saying something, especially for at this time, because early in the Beatles career, songwriting was not like a big forte of theirs. A lot of the lyrics are just incredibly cheesy. But to me, this album in particular gives me that kind of queasy, cheesy feeling more than any other in the lyrics department. A lot of the like musical performances on the album I think are good and respectable and have that classic Beatles sound. And so it's definitely one that I do enjoy listening to, and I think it's better than Beatles for Sale. Um, here's my disc of it, and that's pretty much what I have to say about it. Okay, Joe's got it too.
My disc is this.
Mhm.
Is it
Okay,
my turn? Or are you still
it
talking?
it's your turn. Yeah.
Oh, it's my turn. Yeah, I agree with what you said. So um actually I think I kind of agree with everything you said. So Please Please Me. Again, I don't want to say too much, but I think that album is a lot of fun. And this one, they're getting into that more mature kind of style of songwriting, or I guess a mature sound, but the songwriting isn't up to what you're hearing on some of the later albums, like, well, I guess the next three: Hard Day's Night, Beatles for Sale, Help, some of those. And so these songs, they're not bad. And I like what you said, of course, All My Lovin', Won't Be Long. These songs aren't bad, but they don't really hit me. They don't really grab me one way or another. They're just kind of there. You've got, let's take a look here. All I've Got to Do, Till There Was You. That's yeah, Till There Was You, the like kind of Spanish sounding guitar. I think that's really nice. Of course, All My Lovin' is really special to me. You got Roll Over Beethoven, which is the Chuck Berry cover, which I never really thought about that, what that song means, but it's playful, but it's like, roll over Beethoven, rock and roll is here. I think that's kind of cool. what's the one, Devil in Her Heart, kind of like some of the harmonies on that I like. But this album doesn't really, doesn't, I don't have much to say. It just doesn't really grab me. It's not bad. It just doesn't really hit me one way or another. I mean, I say that as an early Beatles defender. Like some of these early Beatles albums, I'm gonna be putting like little higher than some people would. But this one is, it's fine. Oh, also, let me see if I, okay, so my grandparents are, I'll shout them out. My grandparents are named Kathy and Bob. And you're going to hear a lot about Kathy and Bob in this video. Okay, ready? So this is the US version. This is Meet the Beatles, which is funny because they have the same picture that they just changed one word. And then you have, are you ready? So this is around the same time. It's called the Beatles' second album. And then it's got some, we could go through all of it, but I won't waste your time too many of these songs. And then you ready? I got another copy of Beatles' second album, and I bring both these up because one, that I have them, but two, these were made around the same, like within a few months of each other. Like it's funny to see how these record companies, they saw the success of the Beatles and were just cashing in and selling things in the UK and then the US or whatever. But yeah, so those are the first analog disc acquisitions that I have to show, and I probably would listen to the UK version just because I'm more familiar with it as a whole because I did for the ranking. But yeah, these are pretty cool. And I again think it's funny that it's Meet the Beatles. Like they literally did just change one word and then like repackage it with like a few songs, and then that's Meet the Beatles. But anyway, yeah, those are my thoughts on With the Beatles.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I do want to say one thing. Roll Over Beethoven is probably the cheesiest song on the
Oh
album.
yeah.
I the message of it, it's like rock and roll is here, but like this is really the song
Yeah.
that makes that statement
This is your statement. Yeah.
to me, this song is not strong enough to make the statement in a way that,
Right,
would make
right.
classical music be like, okay, you got us.
Oh man, it's a diss
But
track.
yeah, it is. That is a diss
I
track.
mean, it
That's
really is a
hilarious.
diss track, which I never thought of, but it's like, yeah, you could like, come on, rock and roll, like do better.
Yes. This diss track is like when Eminem said the thing about like awfully hot coffee pot,
God.
it's about that strong. Okay, well, let's do the next one. So this will be number 10 out of 12. For me, it is A Hard Day's Night. And what about you?
For me, my next album is Let It Be.
I have to move our little faces to get that one. Okay, there. All right. Let It Be. So that's another later album that you're putting up.
Uh,
I'll go ahead and talk about Hard Day's Night. Um, what I will say about Hard Day's Night is side A of this album is so solid. Like there's not a thing, it's untouchable. There's not a thing that you can say about side A. It is just classic song after classic song after classic song. At the towards the end of the record, I do think that it tends to fall off just a little bit. Um, the third track on the album is If I Fell, and then towards the back half of the album, they go ahead and fall. And so it's kind of like foreshadowing. If you really are a big brain and are playing 4D chess in terms of your Beatles albums analyzation. I think one thing that I like about this album too is this is really the first time that you really hear George Harrison start to experiment with some sort of non-traditional things and sounds. He plays some nice like 12-string Rickenbacker on this thing, on certain stuff, and just it's cool. I guess it's like a soundtrack for a thing I've never watched. But basically I really, really like this album. And I think that it's just here it is. And I think like when I think about this album, like I always want to listen to it all the way through, even though I know that it gets a little rocky later. And usually I do make it all the way through the album actually, but sometimes I'm like, okay, I'll just listen to something else. But most of the time, even through some of the rockier stuff, I don't think anything on here is necessarily bad or terrible. There's just some stuff that's just a little rocky. So that's my thoughts on it. Um, okay, Joe, your turn.
That's good. I also pulled out my Hard Day's Night CD because I was just looking at the side A versus side B,
Hmm.
and yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I like it. What did I say? Let It Be. Okay, so Let It Be, and is this one here? Let It Be. It's funny. It says about this album cover. This isn't really related, but I had a friend in middle school who always wore a shirt with Let It Be, and the album cover. And I didn't know the album at the time, but I thought that was cool. So I always think of him whenever I see this album cover. Anyway, so on Letting It Be, so we talked about earlier the tension with the Beatles not liking each other, all that yada. And then on this album, they do like each other, but they've been through it. Like they're tired and they're tired of being the Beatles. And this isn't necessarily I don't think this impacts the music in a bad way because I like this album. I like the songs on here. You've got they're hanging out, they get in the studio, and you can even hear on the tape, like before and after each song, them just like talking and like joking around. Now, I do really like the history of this album and how it applies. This is their well, I guess it's technically their last album. I don't think the songs are kind of bluesy. I don't think they're all like that great, but I really appreciate what they did, how they all kind of they came together and were able to create this. I get well last thing because remember they made this album and then they put it away and then they came back and made Abbey Road and released it and then they released Let It Be, so it's technically their last album but like not really. But I mean, what do I have to say about this? My favorite song on here is Get Back. I think that song rocks, and you think I'm doing like the rooftop concert and all that, like that's great stuff, really good. There's also as you talk about the songs being stripped back, there are two songs in here that I like, but they don't really fit because they're too there's too much going on in them, and that is of course Across the Universe and Long and Winding Road, because these songs, I mean, you got Phil Spector and the Wall of Sound, like these songs are just jam packed with like choirs and strings and orchestras, and these songs I like these songs a lot, but they don't really fit here, of course, when you've got other songs where they're just hanging out. But yeah, I like this one. Again, I don't have too much to say about it. I think it's pretty fun, and I really think it's an important part of history and kind of where they ended up. And I'm really glad they came back for one more and made Abbey Road. So there you go.
Oh, cool. Yep. Yep, definitely good thoughts. I will speak about that album in the future. Let's do our number 9. This is the one that I think you won't like. Is Please Please Me is my number 9.
Well, that's my number 9.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, I'm surprised. Okay, here we go.
But even though it's that low, I love Please Please Me. But anyway, I guess we can both talk about it.
No, you
Anyway,
started. You're on. Go ahead.
okay, so got Please Please Me, and we got another shout out to Kathy and Bob, because this is the USA version, because my grandparents are from the US. So it's introducing the Beatles, and this album is actually very close to Please Please Me in terms of track listing. So that's cool. Okay, so Please Please Me. Hold on, let's scroll real quick. All right, I got 3 minutes. Shoot. Okay, Please Please Me. So this album is, for lack of a better word, silly. This is really silly and fun, but I think the songs on here are legit. It sounds like an earnest quest for love. There's this youthful innocence, and there's all the 50s and 60s, doo-wop you hear, but it sounds nice. It sounds sincere. There's some great songs on here. Like you get the harmonicas, like on the title track on, was it There's a Place with the harmonica lead. And my favorite song, Ask Me Why, like I love you because you tell me things I want to know. Bum, bum. I'm terrible at singing, but it's so cutesy, but it's just really fun. It sounds so nice. And like the listen, do you want to tell a secret? Like it just catches you. It's real sweet. There's some covers on here. Oh, I think they're covers. I'm not sure. Some I'm not like as into, but again, it's not taking itself too seriously. They're just having fun. And also they apparently recorded this in the studio in like a 12-hour session in the day. So like there's some kind of magic to it. Like they almost knew, like they knew they were onto something, I guess. But yeah, I think this is really fun. And also it's kind of funny, even though I keep saying it's fun, but like that's the essence of it. It's just a great time. And even though I put this one like ninth, I do really enjoy this particular album a lot. So I think those are my thoughts on Please Please Me.
Yeah, and when I look at your order here, you're going from like newer
I'm
and
all
then
over the
really
place. Yeah.
old and
Yeah.
then the
Old, young.
absolute newest and then the
Yep.
absolute oldest. Uh, that's kind of just funny to see. But of
Oh
course,
yeah.
these are just in order of enjoyment. And so, yeah, I mean, are you working your way towards the middle? Because if you are, then from that metric, your favorites must be Rubber Soul and Revolver. You know,
Yeah, you guys got me.
those are
You cracked
the
the code. All right, we got
median
the video.
the median albums there.
Yeah.
So please please me. Um of course Joe said it's very fun. And of course that's the case. Um he talked about the recording session and how they just hashed it all out really fast. 10 songs in 12 hours is like boom, done. Recording 10 songs in a day session, that is okay, so I was talking about Please Please Me when the recording cut off. I probably said some things. But anyway, Please Please Me is more of like a raw thing. This is material that the band was hashing out at their concerts for a couple of years. And, you know, when you go down the list of these tracks, it's just like Misery is such a classic Beatles song. Please Please Me, Love Me Do. I mean, like the material on here is so essential for Beatles, and so it's kind of above the other three, what I would consider to be like old Beatles albums. It's above all of those because I just think that the material on this particular album is more essential, and they also, I think that they do it better and they have more fun doing it. It really sounds like that they're in their element on this. Please Please Me. And it's like Joe said, it's like some magic there. You can kind of detect that. And so definitely love putting this album on. Every time I listen to it, you got to go all the way through because Twist and Shout is really a nice grand finale. Um, but yet just a killer album. Um, start to finish, I would say this is the first album start to finish on the list that I like start to finish. I might have to say that a couple more times, but maybe instead of doing that, we can move on to number 8. So
Yeah.
for me, number 8 is Help, which if you're
Okay.
looking at how my list is shaping up so far, that if that surprises you, you might be very silly because so far I'm all older stuff.
Mhm. All right.
All right.
My next one is Hard Day's Night.
Hard Day's Night. All right. Um, Joe, since I've already spoken about Hard Day's Night, you could go ahead and talk about Hard Day's Night before I introduce the new album to our list, Help.
All right. So Hard Day's Night. So I've got this one, like Tyler displicated earlier. And then I have now, so this one has a lot of squares on it, but you'll notice that this one only has like 4 squares. So I don't, this is the USA version for the soundtrack for the movie Hard Day's Night. So I don't know if they just like ran out of money when they were printing this or like ran out of pictures, but yeah, this is the USA version of Hard Day's Night. And I got that from my grandparents. Seriously, the grandparents, they're really great. Like they gave me so much stuff and I already have so much stuff that I don't need, but like it's all good because it's you can kind of you need again UK versus US whatever. The album itself, so Hard Day's Night, I liked what Tyler said about this earlier. For me, the songs are either sad or like upbeat, and I think this is another one where I think they're all good. You got If I Fell and I Love Her, I'll Be Back, which is kind of like the sad closer. I think if I remember that one right. But there's almost more like with the exciting songs, there's almost more like like more grit or like energy in the vocals. It's I don't want to say it's like a punk album because obviously punk rock wasn't a thing, but you listen to this off of like even after like with the Beatles and Police, and there's a step up in like energy or like volume. Should have known better, can't buy me love, great song. When I get home, it's it's exciting, but it's still playful. And you think because the album would be a little inconsistent because, well, actually Tyler did talk about that because you've got the first half and the second half. I think it works a little better all the way through because the whole thing is just a party. It's just real great. And I mentioned the soundtrack. So I have seen the movie Hard Day's Night, and I honestly thought it was kind of boring. Like nothing really happens in the movie. They're just kind of, they'll sit around and talk and then they just run around. But the scenes where they run around are great because it plays a Beatles song. Like it plays Can't Buy Me Love, and the Beatles are just running around in a field. And it's great. Like it's a really good time, even if there's not much like going on. It's just real nice. Also, I mentioned If I Fell, but I want to talk a little bit more about that song. Holy crap, this song is so good. And the song, if I the layers and layers and layers of vocals, like you're singing it and you're singing, and all of a sudden you're just like you're singing a different line, and you're like all over, because like I know they talk about the Paul and John songwriting, but like they crush it on this song. And the other thing I have to say about this song is something I've maybe only said once or twice ever. I think this song, I think the song sounds better on vinyl, which for me, like 99% of the time, I think things sound best on CD. And that's a whole other argument. That's a whole other video we could make. But I was listening to my grandparents' record, and with the volume of the vocals that I keep talking about, I think it sounds better on the record, which is crazy because I never, or very rarely say that. But I think, yeah, I really like hearing this on the vinyl. I thought that was pretty cool. And yeah, Hard as Night, I love it. Again, we're in the first half of our list, and I'm already just gushing about all these songs, but I think it's really good.
Great, man. Yeah, the album is definitely very, very good. Love listening to it. I'll have to hear that vinyl difference sometime. That sounds interesting. Um, well, I'll go ahead and talk about Help. Um, my reason why this one ranks higher than the other Beatles albums that are early, um, is because I think that this is the first Beatles album, um, in their career. You know, this is the first one where their songwriting was genius. They had, I mean, think about the different, probably at least half of this album is genius songwriting. Like Help, that is like a perfect song. And then you have like You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, Ticket to Ride, um, Yesterday, like some of the just genius songs. Like when you think of the Beatles, like they're really good songwriting. I think Yesterday is, I think I heard that it's the most covered song of all time, which is, interesting in terms of its legacy and how much it's really affected people. And, apparently people want to, play it and put their spin on it. It's just that good of a song. It draws all kinds of people. And of course it's like simpler, it's kind of stripped back and mega powerful. If you're going to release a single for a song like that, you might as well put a bunch of like torn apart babies all over the cover, because that just, if you're going to, it just makes sense, right? Like one of these emotionally powerful, pondering, reflective songs might as well just be a bunch of baby heads on your cover of your single. Really weird choice. But also just cool. It has nothing to do with the album. Just a brief aside there for a moment. So essentially that's really my thoughts. It's the first glimmer of genius from the Beatles in their career, and that's why it's up here on the list. Okay. Now
Sorry,
we
I have one more thing about Hard Day's Night I forgot to mention, but it's funny. I wrote this down. It's one of the last things I wrote down. I knew I'd forget it. Apparently, Hard Day's Night, and again, I didn't learn this until recently. Apparently, Hard Day's Night was their first album where it was all original songs, and that was apparently something people didn't really do back then. Like they always had some covers or whatever. So I thought that was cool. But yeah, that's it. I'll move on to the next album.
I
But
didn't
yeah,
know that.
I
Huh.
like what you said about the genius of Help, because yeah, it's a good one.
Well, next up is Let It Be for me.
All right. Make sure I got my numbers right here.
And how about
So
you?
we've learned I need to do a better job of organizing my notes, but it's okay because I know my next one is Revolver.
Revolver. Oh,
Another one with all their little heads all over the place.
yeah. Okay. I'll go ahead and talk about Let It Be since you've already spoken about this album. Um, I love this album. I would say that this is the first album on the list where I love it. We have, like, as we're going through, it's like no real identity, kind of figuring out what the Beatles want to do. And then you go with the Beatles, and it's just kind of not a very strong album, but it's so classic. And then Hard Day's Night, it's like you can't argue with this album. It's so good. I was talking about Side A is so good. And then Please Please Me, you have the first album that's like front to back, really good. And then Help, you have the first glimmer of genius from the Beatles. And then you have Let It Be, which is the first album that I love. And so that's kind of some basis for the totality of my order up to this point. And essentially what happens with this album is it's after the Beatles kind of freak you out for a few years, they come with this kind of eccentric album, and it's more stripped back, but it doesn't lack any of the ambition. I guess it lacks some of the like try hardiness of previous albums that they've done, like Sergeant Pepper's, like these albums where there's like so much experimentation. I guess it lacks some of that. It's more stripped back. But on Let It Be, you can tell what they're trying to do is just write genuinely amazing songs. It's all about the songwriting with this album. And so, one of the reasons I really like the Beatles is all that art and that experimentation and stuff. And so I guess that's why Let It Be tends to be around here whenever I think about what are my favorite Beatles albums, kind of right in the middle. But even though it lacks that stuff, songwriting here is killer. I mean, there and so many lyrics that are just like, what the heck is he even talking about? Like, I don't know what dig a pony means at all, but I love it, and I love the way he says it and or sings it. I love the way it sounds, and it gets really stuck in my head. And kind of like when you think about dig a pony, it's a very odd vocal delivery. He's kind of like using weird rhythms. It's a little bit too fast for how slow the song is. He's like a da 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 da, and the song is just kind of trudging along. It's a fascinating thing. Joe, you brought up earlier Across the Universe. Oh man, what a journey of a song. All in kind of a small package, really. But there's a whole lot of layers going on here. Really, really good song. I Mean Mine is beautiful, just like a kind of somber, beautiful. There's some things that I enjoy about the album. Like a lot of it comes across as kind of like they're just like seasoned musicians, good songwriters, and they're writing. Not everything here is just like bright and happy anymore. They're men who've lived lives and had experiences, and so they're writing about some things that are a little bit deeper, some things that are a little more interesting. And then after they finish the song, they're just like telling fart jokes, and then it's on to the next song. It's really cool. It's sort of a live environment, which is a little bit similar, you could say, to Please Please Me, how it was kind of recorded. It's in a similar way, with a lot of the material on Let It Be anyway. I mean, and you talked about some of the interesting, like the rooftop performance. That's definitely very wrapped up in Let It Be. And when I listen to that album, I think about that rooftop performance, and that's a neat thing, And what a way to go out. It's good. It's they could have gone out on Abbey Road, but they got it together and they went out on Let It Be, and it is a worthy send off to a bunch of solo careers that were pretty interesting. And so I guess those are kind of my thoughts on Let It Be. And here you have put Revolver.
That's excellent. I really like everything you said, and I I like a few things. I like you talk about the ambition of it. At this point, they don't really have anything to prove. They can do whatever, but they're still doing freaking whatever. But also, Tyler's a drummer, and so he's going to be thinking very closely about the rhythmic qualities. And you're like, yeah, like this one has something's doing like this really fast or so at the same time. So that's cool. And I really like hearing that coming from you because like, yeah, that makes sense.
Definitely just stands out because it's not standard, you know. A
Right.
slow song, you're not going bippity 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 bippity,
Yeah.
but then Dig a Pony, which is what I was addressing, it very different. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I'm a little confused because I really like your list so far, but without saying too much, there are some albums that I thought Tyler didn't like that he has not mentioned yet. So if he loves this album, that means he loves those albums, which means that I'm wrong. But that's cool. That's
I'm
really
gonna
great.
say this: you're in for it.
I am. I'm excited. I'm more excited to hear about this, and
Yeah,
am to share my own list.
yeah.
Okay.
I have some bars to drop here, but
Oh, let's do it. Like, guys,
yeah,
just smash that like
yeah.
button.
But yeah. Go
Okay.
ahead though. Yeah.
So while you're all liking the video, I'm gonna start on Revolver. I am so this album goes in the middle for me because there's stuff on this that I love, completely freaking absolutely love. And there's stuff that I'm just not really that into or I just don't get. But basically I'm all over the place. Um, but let's kind of go through it. You got Eleanor Rigby. This song is perfect. You've got them singing and you got the strings, and that's it. And that's the song. It's like you talk about we're going to keep talking about the brilliance and musical genius of the Beatles, but like wow, like every time I hear the song I'm like no one does that. Like what the heck is this? It's really nice. She said this song's a trip. I mean, you've got the bass, the keyboard lead. Let me see my notes here. The actual song itself. Wow. The I know what it's like to be dead. I know what it's to be sad. Like it's crazy. And then apparently George Harrison played bass on this song. Really nice. And then
Oh,
also for no one, which is just him singing, and then the harpsichord. I think it's a harpsichord, and then the French horn solo on it, and that's kind of sends it off, and that's it. It's like it's real nice. It's like these three songs are like I think they're some of my favorite Beatles songs ever, and they're so good. Then you've got what about Bird Can Sing, and Your Bird Can Sing, Dr. Robert, and Got to Get You Into My Life. Those songs are pretty great. I think those are fun. You got Here, There, and Everywhere, which I like, but there's like there's not very much there. Like the song's so good, but like I want more. I want more of it. You got Taxman, the opener, which I like, but it does that thing where it pans all the vocals to one side and then all the instruments to one side, and it's a very jarring panning listen, which granted like that's the point, like it's supposed to just mess with your head, but I never really like, maybe I just want to listen to it in mono, I don't know, but it's a good one. And then you've got I want to tell you, doesn't really do that much for me. I'm trying to remember that one. That's again, there's when you're going through like this many songs, but you got Yellow Submarine and Good Day Sunshine. Those are kind of silly. And then I'm Only Sleeping, Love You Too, and then Tomorrow Never Knows. They're so transcendental and Eastern and weird. I'm not really into those. I know Tomorrow Never Knows is like a fan favorite, and again, I get it, but like I'm just don't think it's so like it's just a little too weird for me. Not as into it. So I've mentioned every song on this album because where do I put this? Because I'm all over the place on just crazy Revolver stuff. If we're keeping score, that's 8 songs that I generally like, and then 6 songs that I generally don't like. I think I mentioned all of them. We'll find out. I'll probably watch this video and be like, oh, I forgot that. But whatever. That's my general thoughts on the album. But the reason I'm putting it here is because it's not just because, oh, I just want to put it in the middle because I'm, meet in the middle. It's because, they're in when I remember this album, I generally gravitate to the songs I like. And I think about these songs like Eleanor Rigby and, He Said, She Said, these songs I really like and adore and want to hear like all the time. So that's kind of my thoughts on that one. And well, yeah, we'll see where Tyler puts some of these others. Cause again, I'm enthralled and, but both of our lists.
yeah, that's very interesting. I had no real idea of what you thought of Revolver before you just said all that stuff. Um, She Said, one of the best Beatles songs ever, of course.
It is.
Glad to hear you're in on
You
that
need to
one.
talk about it more.
Yeah. Yep, we'll talk about it more. So now, let's see, I think we're on number 6. So for me,
Sace.
number 6 is the White Album.
All right. My number 6 is the Magical Mystery Tour.
All right. There we go. Okay, so both of us are just bringing up new albums. I'll go ahead and go first. Um, let's see, White Album. Um, my main thing to say about White Album is that side 2 is incredible. Or not side 2, but like
Disc 2?
disc 2 would be the right way of saying it. Yeah.
Oh,
Disc
disc.
2 is one of my very favorite Beatles albums. It's high on my list. Disc 1 mostly sucks. That's how I think about the White Album. And so I've come around on it a little bit. Some of the things that I didn't used to like as much, I like a little bit better now. You mentioned that Dear Prudence is one of your favorites on the album. I definitely disagree.
Talked
Uh,
about that one before. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I really don't get it. Back in the USSR as the opener. You were talking about a 1-2 punch earlier. You have Back in the USSR and then you have Dear Prudence. Back in the USSR, fine enough, but that's about it. For me, it's kind of a simple song. I don't really like the lead guitar melodies. To me, they're kind of like, I don't know, kind of like lame or not very interesting. The ones that go wing ding 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 ding, those things, I find them to be kind of not great. And then Dear Prudence, and I don't see much in the way that of something that I like necessarily. I don't think it's a genius. Glass Onion is the third song on the album on the first disc.
Following along on my disc.
Yeah, Glass Onion, it makes cool references to other Beatles songs. So it's kind of like those people that like are so into Star Wars that they only watch it in like the jackknife order, whatever that means. Like I like Star Wars and everything, but I don't even know what that means. But like if you like the Beatles, you will listen to Glass Onion and be like, "Hey, I get it. I get it. I can see what they're kind of
I
doing."
understood that reference. I understood that reference. I understood that.
Basically. Yes. And so that's fun to do as a Beatles fan. And then you have Obla Di Obla Da, which is one of the worst Beatles songs ever. I just think it is tragically horrible and very annoying. Um, Borderline unlistenable, except it has some pep, I guess, but it's really not good. And then you mentioned Wild Honey Pie, um, which is right after Obla Di Obla Da. What a twofer. Um, I'd like to hear someone's perspective, maybe. I've on why Wild Honey Pie.
Drop in the comments below.
Yeah,
Tell us if you listen to this and why.
yeah. What is
Like,
that?
wait, no.
I'll kind of not go track by track anymore. I'll talk about some important things from side 1. While My Guitar Gently Weeps. My thoughts on this song are that this song had potential. And I do think it's good in its form on the album. I think it's good. I think it's undercooked. I just think it's unfinished. I think it could have been developed into so much more than it is. And so when I listen to it, I find it to be disappointing. Um, Now let's see. Blackbird is of course essential. Julia, fantastic musically. Really enjoy Julia. The lyrics are all right, but the music is fantastic. And then this is interesting. Um, so the Beatles do this song on side one called "I'm So Tired," and this is like the worst idea for a song. Like, how could it possibly be exciting to make a song about being tired or sleeping or resting or napping? I it's but what's interesting is that on Revolver, which came a couple years earlier, they do that one song called "I'm Only Sleeping," and they somehow managed to make that one exciting. And so I know the Beatles can make a song about sleeping exciting, but they just didn't do it here on the White Album. It's a miserable failure. Um, so now moving on to what I think is really special about this album that I love, which is disc 2 on the CD. Uh, disc 2 is brilliant almost all the way through. You know, you mentioned everybody's got something to hide except me and my monkey. That is one of the most experimental, bizarre, thoroughly fascinating Beatles songs that they have ever made. It's definitely high on the list in terms of being really awesome. Helter Skelter, that is a landmark Beatles song. Uh, you know, song topic, sound palette. Holy cow, really cool. Of course, Savoy Truffle, underrated Beatles song, probably in my top three Beatles songs. I think um, it just is. There's so much unique about the song, and I think it's underappreciated generally. Of course, big Beatles fans will probably say, "Oh yeah, I love that song." Revolution number 9 still sucks. I think
Thank you.
the difficulty I
Respect.
have with Revolution number 9 is that people want to say it's so like interesting or deep or they have something to say, but like, why is it like, I think if you want to do something like that, you have to sell it. And I think the Beatles don't even try to sell it. I think they say, well, we're the Beatles, so that should sell it enough. Like, we're the Beatles and we made it. And so therefore that should sell it. Just the fact that we're the ones that made it. It basically is, like you mentioned, a sound collage of a bunch of, it just like, I don't think it's really that deep like people try to say that it is. And so, basically two perspectives on it. Number one, it doesn't sell itself to you, so it makes you not want to check it out. And then number two, when you do begrudgingly check it out, it's still pretty vapid in terms of like, oh, what could it mean? Like, it's very uninteresting thoughts. The Beatles should really stay out of that lane. And, they pretty much did stay out of that lane while they were the Beatles, at least. Um, there is so much though in terms of songs on side 2 and then the scattered tracks from side 1 that I do genuinely think are genius. And so it goes above Let It Be um because it has more experimentation and it keeps some of that genius. And Let It Be is what, like a 10-track album. There are more than 10 tracks on the White Album, disc 1 and 2, that I would consider to be genius. And it has that added kind of wild experimentation fairly frequently on the album. And the White Album, another thing that I will say about it, of course, it's untrimmed. A lot of it's undercooked. Like I talked about Why My Guitar Gently Weeps. That is an undercooked song, very disappointing, but still good. Um, but a lot of the album is just undercooked and kind of untrimmed. Uh, and so those are kind of some of my thoughts about the White Album. And so I think that people kind of overinflate how good the White Album is, and I don't understand why. Like, I've read people talk about, oh, the White Album, people just aren't ready for it. You know, I would really just rather not listen to any of that weird stuff. Like, and I listen to a lot of weird stuff. But I think that the Beatles doing some of their weird stuff, I think my biggest problem with the White Album is that same thing that I was saying about Revolution Number 9. I'm not just gonna care just because it's the Beatles that made it, you know? Like I know that that is some pretty serious provenance. Like you think in the art world, there's like a certain painting, and maybe it's just like a white square, but it sells for millions of dollars because of who the person who made it is, because anybody could make just a white square, but it's not valuable unless it's made by a certain person, they say. Um, some people are into that kind of thing. Um, I don't know why I said white square. I guess it's probably because the album cover is a white square. I probably did that by accident. Um, but a lot of the songs on White Album, I feel like is kind of egotistical on the part of the Beatles. It almost feels like an insult to the audience. It's like, we're going to give this to you and we're not going to try to make it into a nice album package. This is just all the material we did at this time, which is a very turbulent time, which you touched down on earlier, where they're kind of fighting and, disengaging with each other a little bit. And they're just like, here, just have it, do what you want with it, is the way it comes across. It comes across that the Beatles feel like they can do whatever they want and be accepted, which is egotistical. And, so I feel kind of like they're trying to insult me or think they're better than me sometimes on this album. Not like I'm offended, but I feel like that's an emotion that I do get when I listen to some of this album. And it's certainly an emotion I get to when I get to Revolution Number 9. It's certainly that. It's like, wow, you guys really think you're deep, huh? You just think you're the biggest geniuses on this planet. Like that's a feeling that I get when I listen to Revolution Number 9 and a lot of side 1. And so those are kind of my general thoughts about the White Album. Because I have a lot of negative thoughts about the White Album, I was definitely a little bit surprised that it moved this far up my list. And I imagine you might have something to say about that too.
Yeah, so this I like everything you've said. I mean, I keep praising Tyler, but the way you talk about art and how like yeah, this art might not be good, but because of who made it, people are gonna go crazy about it. That's something that I wasn't really thinking about, and that's why I like doing these videos in general because we both bring so many just different ideas. But my thought about Tyler is, yeah, this is one that I thought you would put a lot lower, and you were able to get through some of the things you didn't like a little better than what I did, which is good.
I guess so. Yeah. It's the worst on your list. Yeah.
Yeah, apparently.
But really, yeah. And it's kind of like I talked about earlier. Whenever you described why it was the worst on your list, I was like, yeah, I mean, a lot of those thoughts are kind of inarguable. It's definitely the worst in terms of being an album. And it is just a mess and they're fighting and people are interested in that, which I'm interested in that, but it's not going to be
As,
that high on my list.
I'm also more interested in the history of things and how
Mm.
history applies to the albums or whatever.
It definitely comes to mind when you listen to it. Music brings up feelings and ideas and history and your past as a person. And but one thing that I will say to you, being that it is the worst album on your list, is give side, like, think about it, maybe, is like side 2 is actually good.
Oh, I'm only listening to side 2 from now on.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's
That's where I'm
kind of what I
starting.
do.
If I'm gonna revisit this one, yeah, I'll just cut out all the slack or whatever, and or cut the fat. That's what it is.
Mm.
And then
One thing I will do before you talk about Magical Mystery Tour is I have some show and tell to do. I have
Ew.
I forgot to show Let It Be. For whatever reason, I don't have help. I just haven't got it yet. And then here is the White Album, and I have like the 2-disc
Oh,
package
cool.
thing. And so, yep, that's the end of my show and tell. Let's hear about Magical Mystery Tour.
I got some catch up to do as well. Just one. I have this one, the revolving album, which I like, and it's very cool. And then, okay, so Magical Mystery Tour. So we've got this one here. This album cover is not good. I'm just gonna let you know. I like the album a lot. This album cover is it's something. But then we also got, ready? So from the grandparents, we got this big thing. So you can look at the album cover even bigger this time. But okay, so Magical Mystery Tour. There's some songs on here that I don't think are all that great. Like, for example, you got two in a row, Flying and Blue Jay Way. Those songs are weird. However, there's something about the flow of this album, song to song to song to song, that is so ridiculously good. I mean, because it's the Magical Mystery Tour, so it's meant to be this big crazy thing. I mean, you've got the opener, you've got Magical Mystery Tour, roll up, and super explosive and exciting, and then you immediately have Fool on the Hill, which is quiet and introspective and has flutes, and it's like it's the 1-2 punch. But the contrast between those two songs, it's like, what the heck even is this? And you've got those songs. You got I Am the Walrus, which is this just crazy weird song about nothing, but it's great. It's a really good time. Obviously, Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane is like the happiest song ever. It's and like I don't want to be like this shouldn't work, but like this shouldn't work because there's so much like the way they all interact and work together to create this magical mystery tour. It's real. And also well, I see apparently Tyler has I don't know where Tyler's put this on his list. He's apparently put this higher than me. Pat yourself on the back because a lot of people put this album low, and I don't get it because like there's other albums I put high. I get why people put them low, like totally makes sense. But this one is like Magical Mystery Tour. Like you can't miss out on this. Even the All You Need Is Love, which is like a song I don't think is that interesting, but as the closer of this, yeah, it's freaking great. Like you get through this. I keep saying Magical Mystery Tour, but you get this whole acid trip, and then you get to hear All You Need Is Love, and it's like that's it. And there's all these like little also is it Baby You're Rich Man with like the synth just it's like you hear that and you're like you're off, you're high, you're somewhere else. um uh yeah, I actually didn't really realize how much like I haven't looked at this in a while, but like every song just kind of hits. But also there's all these like little interesting stories again with the history, little stories and facts where apparently John Lennon was talking with a student who said they were studying Beatles songs in school, and he thought that was funny, like in English class, and he thought that was funny, so he said, I'm going to make the most nonsensical meaningless song ever, I'm the Walrus. And that was where that came from. And apparently it was George Martin, the producer, who said he said putting Strawberry Fields Forever here and not on the Sgt. Pepper's album, he said that was the biggest mistake of his career. So like little interesting tidbits and facts about this album that I think are make it even like that extra like little more compelling. But I mean, shoot, I just want to play this. I just want to listen to it now. But yeah, Magical Mystery Tour.
Definitely did not know that he said that was the worst mistake of his career. That's very interesting. Well, yeah, I will say it is refreshing to see it high on a list, like where you have it. Uh, of course, yeah, like you said, I'm getting to it, and I've definitely talked to a lot of Beatles fans who place it as the worst album. Definitely had that conversation several times, and yeah, it's like you said, I just really don't understand that perspective at all. Um, I happen to really like the album cover, by the way, and so like I get it, it's ugly, but I mean,
But
I
you
think
like the
it's
chaos? Is that what it is?
yeah, I think it's cool. I don't know. I mean, it's not it's not good, but I really love it.
Yeah, it makes
I don't
sense.
know. It's just it's bizarre. And when we
I will
see
say
it,
it does fit with all that we've talked about with this album.
that's true. It's very fitting for the content. Yeah, definitely. But you know, I think it's I think it's bold. I think I respect its boldness in being just kind of garish and ridiculous. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's nothing beautiful, that's for sure. It's no Abbey Road cover. But let's go to our next one. So now we're on number 5. Okay. All right, I'll start pretty much now. Okay, so now we're on number 5, and my number 5 happens to be Rubber Soul.
Okay.
How about you, Joe?
My number 5 is Beatles for Sale.
Beatles for sale. All right. Um, Beatles for sale was mentioned by me quite a bit earlier. Um, so what are your thoughts on this disc?
Yes. Also, I'd like to point out, look where my least favorite Beatles album is on Tyler's list, and Tyler's least favorite Beatles album on my list. And
Hmm,
they're so that's interesting.
that is.
Pretty good. Okay, so Beatles for sale. So if you look at it chronologically, this is the fourth album they made in like 18 months. Like it's not even like 2 years, like 63 to 64. Like they're cranking them out. They're exhausted from making albums and touring. And on the way, they meet Bob Dylan. And Bob Dylan shows them marijuana. And so this is where they're not like doing anything super experimental yet, but they're a little more like getting a little more into it, I guess. I don't know. But this album, it kind of shows how they're really feeling at this point in time. Again, with the history of it, how they're feeling. And this album's about problems. Now, I kind of got to explain myself here because remember, the White Album is also about the problems they're going through. And I put that one last. But I think the difference is here is kind of like what I mentioned earlier, where it's unsettling in a good way. Like what Tyler mentioned with like no reply and I'm a loser. Like right off the bat, this album is it's a little darker, it's a little more serious. And while it's not super experimental yet, like they get to on Rubber Soul and Revolver and Sergeant Pepper's, I think some of that darkness, I think some of that emotion, I would argue, starts here on this one. You know, it's dreary, it's reflective. You know, you got the song, it opens with the line, I'm a loser and I'm not what I appear to be. Like that's not something you expect to hear on like a happy, you know, happy-go-lucky early Beatles song. But man, there's just so much intensity and sadness on this album in a good way that I really like. I mean, you got those two I mentioned, Babies in Black, I'll Follow the Sun, like Tyler mentioned, great song. I Don't Want to Spoil the Party, What You're Doing. Like these lyrics, some of this is just heartbreaking. It's and there's I get why people put it lower. I mean, it's totally understandable. Something about this album just it's just get also. Um I keep reading my shows and tell. And then we got so this is Beatles 65. This was the version they released in the United States because I guess they just can't release the same. They can't make up their minds. They can't release the same thing on different continents. But it's called Beatles 65, which is also weird because I guess that was released in 65 and Beatles for Sale was released in 64. So I don't know. But anyway, there's just like so much that I really like dig into emotionally on this album. And also, I'm going to read the first verse of I Don't Want to Spoil the Party. So it goes like this: it says, I don't want to spoil the party, so I'll go. I would hate my disappointment to show. There's nothing for me here, so I will disappear. If she turns up while I'm gone, please let me know. Like, that's so sad. Like, I was listening to this and I was audibly crying. I was like, no, like, I was just like, wow, that's really depressing. That's so, but then you got the fun stuff, like Tyler mentioned, 8 Days a Week. So good. I mean, that's just a straight up pop song, but like, I mean, you can't go wrong. Like the bass on that do 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 do, and he plays the D and then the E major chord where you typically
Oh
in
yeah,
E or as
sounds good.
yeah or no it's the E minor to the G, which in music theory those like in the D major scale those you would play D E minor G because the note G is in the E minor, but like
Can I
that
ask,
sure.
are you talking about the part where it's like da 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 da
Well, that too.
da da? Is that
Yeah,
the one
yeah.
you're talking
Yeah.
about?
Well,
That part?
I'm talking about just the ooh I need your love. It goes do 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 do, but it does it in both places. So yes,
Oh, okay, cool.
yeah. But I mean that whole song is just it's just a banger. It's just a great and like I remember when I was learning bass, my the guy I was learning bass from was teaching me that bass line. I thought that was like, wow, that's really cool. I'm really impressed by that. Also every little thing, it's a love song, but it doesn't sound silly. It's got so much more weight to it, saying, you know, when I'm with her, I'm happy, you know, I will love her forever. You know, it's every lyric on the song is great. Covers, yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. The covers aren't as good as the original ones, but I think they are more locked in musically than they are in other places, like some of the previous ones, like rock and roll music, Mr. Moonlight, you know, Kansas City. Um, I think it's great. I really love this album, and yeah, I think that's it for Beatles for Sale for me.
Mhm. Kansas City, you're just biased.
Well, that of course, being from Kansas City, but
No, I like Kansas City too, for sure. Um, yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, the thoughts that you said, like, the only thing that I would dispute is some of the lyric writing is just more corny
sure.
to me. Like, I don't think some of the lyrics are so good, but I like the album. And
Mhm.
so a lot of the things that you said about it, I'm like, yeah, yep, yep. Even though it's the worst on my list. Um, I definitely when I see it above some of these other albums, it's like, how in the world?
How in the universe is this?
The thing that I most don't understand about your order is
All of
how
it.
in the world, like, Beatles for Sale, where maybe like the highlight would be 8 days a week, is better than I Am the Walrus, Hello Goodbye, Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane, All You Need Is Love. That is
You gotta remember with me, I'm depressed. I like the sad music.
okay.
It's like it's the melancholy, it's the happy and sad, it's the you know
Okay,
rips your
yeah.
heart out. But I
It
mean,
that makes
still,
sense.
but also I will say about you, a lot of people put that album last and they don't like it. You put it last and you still like it, which
Yeah,
yeah, that's great. I mean,
definitely do. I'm a sucker for the Beatles, I guess, Great, great stuff. Well, cool. I will talk a little bit about Rubber Soul here. Um, so on Rubber Soul, um, this you get more strokes of genius. It's early for them. Also, one of the reasons that it's ranked this high on my list is because you have strokes of genius, you have some experimenting, some early experimenting, and they get just a little bit wonkier here. Definitely a lot of the songs on this album are not very traditional. There are some that are actually kind of surprisingly traditional, like Girl, which is a song that I really don't care for very much. But a lot of the album is really pushing for something. Um, like Norwegian Wood. That's a very interesting song. In My Life, one of the best Beatles songs ever. There is the I'm Looking Through You is a very interesting song. I happen to love also Michelle. I think the melody of that song is one of the best melodies that the Beatles have ever written. The verses and the chorus, I just think that is so cool. That song just kind of like snakes along and takes you on a bit of a journey, and it's somber, but it's also like expressing this admiration for this woman that he's in love with. And um Rubber Soul as an album is very good, which is another reason why it gets the edge compared to the White Album, because the White Album is not good as an album. It's just got like here and there sort of thing, and then side two, of course, but it's a very bloated, very disorganized, kind of chaotic. Whereas Rubber Soul really feels like a package. It's well trimmed, and so much of it is so good. I will say there is some stuff on it that I just think is decent, but the stuff that's good on it, I think, is absolutely massive. And so, while I said earlier that Let It Be is the first album that I love front to back, Rubber Soul is still a bit early for me to love it front to back yet. It's not that kind of thing. I don't necessarily love every single thing on it. Like I mentioned the song Girl earlier, which is something I'm not particularly into. I think it's more standard or whatever. There's it's like decent, there's some decent songs on Rubber Soul, but I always listen to the full album. And so, maybe I won't say it's a good album front to back, but I will say it's at least a decent album from front to back. And the things that I love a whole lot. And of course, there's some experimenting going on, which Let It Be does not have. And so those are some of my justifications why it's up above White Album and Let It Be. Um, yeah, that's those are some of my thoughts on Rubber Soul. I think it's a very good album.
that's great.
Oh, let's see. We can now go on to number 4. Number 4 for me is Revolver. Okay. How about you?
Taking my notes. A lot of albums to go through today. Number 4 for me is Abbey Road.
Abbey Road. All right. Can't quite get it aligned. Okay, there we go. So we've talked about Revolver before, and we have not talked about Abbey Road. So I'll go ahead and give my thoughts on Revolver. Um, Revolver is undeveloped and undercooked, much in the same way as the White Album. I'm sure that Joe knew I was probably going to mention something about this because I've told him that I think like this about Revolver. Um, However, I think that Revolver is a really, really strong album as a whole. I do think everything on it is quite good. I just am a little disappointed with what I think some of them could be. Um, going down the list, Taxman, really excellent, kind of iconic song. Eleanor Rigby, one of the best Beatles songs ever. I'm Only Sleeping. They managed to make a song about sleeping, really exciting. And then there's Love You Too, which is like a pretty good song. And then Here, There, and Everywhere, which I think is great. Yellow Submarine is the worst song on the album, but it is iconic, and so it doesn't get too many points off. It's skippable to me. It's the only skippable track here. Everything's very like essential to Revolver. And then you have She Said, which is one of the best Beatles songs ever. So cool. Love the drums. Probably my favorite performance of Ringo. Then you got Good Day Sunshine, which is great. And Your Bird Can Sing is, I guess maybe it and Yellow Submarine are technically skippable, but I usually do not skip And Your Bird Can Sing. And then there's For No One, which is an underrated Beatles classic song. Super, super incredible song. Dr. Robert, it's like jammable, but nothing too great. I Want to Tell You, kind of the same thing. Got to Get You Into My Life. Brilliant song. Obviously, it was covered by Earth, Wind, and Fire in the future. And then you have Tomorrow Never Knows, which you said is a fan favorite. And I happen to be one of those who really, really dig this song, even though it is that sort of trippy, weird thing. Um, I think it's one of the best times they ever did that, but I don't think it's the best time they ever did that. Um, I think they really do make a song out of what they're doing on Tomorrow Never Knows, and I think that's cool. Whenever they do this trippy thing, I don't think they always make a song out of it quite. So this album is completely all over the place. Every song is totally disconnected from every other song. It is random. It is a mess. Um, Most of the track lengths are pretty short because most of the things are not as developed as they quite could be. And so there is some disappointment on this album. This album, if I think it was like kind of taking its time with and less just kind of a smorgasbord of just like throwing whatever at the wall, um, I really am just kind of surprised. It's like you have this many good ideas at the same time in 1966, and you just like didn't really develop very much on any of the good ideas. Um, I don't know. It was definitely a hot time of creativity for the band. 1966 and on is when you really see the Beatles kind of start taking their forays into like wilder experimentation, and they're really not really writing pop songs anymore. There is like Taxman, you could say maybe they're writing a pop song there, but it's got a whole other kind of edge than a lot of pop songs that they will write. um you know uh, like it's got that bam, it's loud, and it's slightly aggressive. They're a little bit amped on that song, so it's a pop song, but but like I also mentioned, She Said, For No One, just such good songs. Some of my favorites ever. And so Revolver, while I think it's, like I said, undercooked and underdeveloped, I think that it has highlights that happen to be some of the absolute best Beatles material ever. And so it made its way up to number 4 for me, which kind of like I said, the White Album surprised me that it made it so high on my list. I'll say the same thing about Revolver because I feel kind of a similar way about it, but it did. It made it all the way to number 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And this was the other album. Now that you've talked about it, this is the other album that I thought you were going to put really low, and you
Mm-hmm.
obviously did not.
Mm-hmm. But as you can tell, I still said what I have to say.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Like I think it's yeah, I was surprised, number 4. Wow. But like
yeah.
I like all the Beatles. Yeah.
In my head, I was thinking I knew I was going to put the White Album last. I was trying to decide whether Tyler would put Revolver or the White Album last.
Yeah, I've talked crap before. And I kind of did there too. I mean, seriously, you know how frustrating it is to have this many freaking good ideas and then just let them all just be underdeveloped.
Yeah.
This album could have been really something. And a lot of people think, it's one of the best. Some people think that it's the best Beatles album. Man, I I wish that like Eleanor Rigby was 8 minutes long.
Yeah, honestly.
Like that's really what I think
I
about this album.
agree. I
There's so
100%
much
agree.
stuff that just could be so much expounded on. It, yeah, I don't know. That's how I feel. But
Yeah, that is a great take.
yeah.
I've never thought of that, but or
I mean,
like
a
thought
song is a
the
song as
song was like
boring
10
as
minutes. Yeah.
a song as boring as Hey Jude is that long.
I know.
Like, how can you not make Eleanor Rigby five
Yeah.
minutes even? Like,
Mhm.
that's nuts, And Gotta Get You Into My Life. We saw what Earth, Wind, and Fire did with it, and their version is better because
Yeah,
they
they killed
developed
them.
the heck out of it. It's so amazing. That could have been done here, but it was not done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are just some examples that come to mind. But
My dad has a CD of Earth, Wind, and Fire Greatest Hits, and I ended up with it somehow, and I think he has it now, but whatever. It gets passed around. But whenever I pick up that CD, I'm like, I want to hear "Got to Get You Into My Life." Like it's like the second to last track on the CD. But like I don't care. I just go straight to that song.
sure.
But yeah,
Epic
it's
song.
nuts. Mhm.
Well, Abbey Road, let's hear it.
Okay, Abbey Road. So more merch items to show. So I've got this, and then I've obviously got the shirt, and the shirt was a package deal. I think it was a Christmas present. It's from my parents. So it came with two things. It came with this album. The album is a repressing, but it came with this shirt. So I thought that was really cool and really nice. That's from my parents. So I thought that was really nice of them. And yeah, I like I like this shirt. I wear it to work sometimes because it's a cool shirt. Well, I guess you can't see it. Now you can see it because you see these men. Yeah. Oh, yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, that's not Abbey Road, but those are other albums that Tyler owns on disc.
Yeah, I forgot to show them.
They're good.
Yeah. Back to
Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah, this whole Revolver thing, because I remember Tyler showed me he got Revolver on CD. I'm like, why does Tyler own that? I thought he hated that album. I was like, okay, hold on. I think he's gonna put the and you put it fourth. I'm like, all right, let's go. Okay.
No, I don't hate it. I just have something to say.
No, I thought you did hate it before
because I
that.
have because I have something to say. You thought I
Really
hated. Yeah.
Okay. And then okay, Abbey Road. It's uh kind of hard to talk about this album and because like what do I say about this album that hasn't been said like a million times? It's Abbey Road, everything on this album is either like super triumphant and exciting, or it's also just kind of cruising and grooving. You've got your like kind of more hits or your songs on side A, and then side B is of course that medley of just all these songs, just quick ideas, just running through it. Yeah, they went out with a bang. Lots of bass movement, these high guitar shredding solos, lots of epic stuff on here. Of course, you got your classics like Something and Here Comes the Sun, which is amazing, and it might even be my favorite George Harrison song. I mean, like everything on this song it's really great. But then you've also got the sun, 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 here it comes, and it like layers and layers it, and then like the Wurlitzer or whatever, like this the keyboard solos, and then the next keyboard solo is like it just kind of hangs out over the melody. Really great. There's a song on here that I love that I think some people tend to not like, but I don't get it. I love it. It's Maxwell's Silver Hammer. I mean, this song is bouncy and exciting and fun. And you got the anvil hits, clang clang. It's and also I don't know if it's one that people don't like, but it's definitely one that needs more love. Octopus Garden. I mean, you got Ringo singing on this. It's real nice. It has a I like kind of for the same reasons as Maxwell's Silver Hammer, where it's just going. Um, gosh, I mean, again, I could say everything, but it's Abbey Road. It's it's freaking Abbey Road. The medley as a whole, like there aren't really songs on here that I listen to on their own, like Mean Mr. Mustard or Polythene Pam, whatever. But like when you listen to it all the way through, like yeah, it has that really triumphant, exciting. They're just burning through it. I mean, it's literally the songs are all like what a minute each, and it's just like bam, 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 bam. Yeah, I mean, gosh, the whole thing is just I mean, it's a lot to take in. It's jam packed. But like this is another one I want to. I mean, I've got all my CD players here. I'm like, I just want to put this in and kind of go through some of the. Oh my gosh, oh darling. Yeah, I got bored of looking at my Word document, so I'm holding the disc itself. The End, which not the end of the album, well, that is the end of the album, but the song titled The End. This song made me cry, which is
Oh.
weird because that's never happened before. And I think it's because I listened through all, like I started with Please Please Me and went all the way through, and you finally get to the end and you're like, that's it. Like that was everything they ever did. That was the Beatles. And it's like it's a good album when you get to the end and you're in tears like that. Like man, yeah, really good, really solid all the way through. I mean, I could keep going, but I want to yeah, I see Tyler has not talked about this album yet, and I want to see where he puts these next three, one in particular. So there you go.
Yeah, that
There it
was
is.
good. I think the thing that you said the most that I agree with was, um, kind of like, what can you say that hasn't been said?
Exactly.
Because whenever I was kind of thinking about what I wanted to say about this album, which I'll be doing in the future, it was like it. I don't just want to say normal things. It's
Yeah.
like this album's really been kind of like really thoroughly looked at by people, and so I guess it's definitely cool to hear your thoughts, just like what you in particular are really drawn to on the album. Something that stood out to me about something that you said was, you kind of grew up and being shown like the Paul McCartney Wing stuff, and then you come to a song like Maxwell's Silver Hammer, and it's something that you're really into. I wonder if that might be related at all.
I'm sure. I mean, and that and in the influence of the bass on that song, of course,
Mm.
that's why I go for songs like 8 Days a Week and um what's another one? Any iconic Beatles bass line, but that one bass is literally he's like playing like octaves and just is just jumping the whole time. The same on
Yeah.
Octopus Garden as well. He's just like it's just kind of whatever, but it's nice.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Now we can go on to our next ones, number three, and that's where I'm putting Magical Mystery Tour.
Let's go.
Yeah. There's probably some people who are watching this video thinking, how high can this freaking album go? That's where it goes, number three. How about you?
Sergeant Pepper's is my third one.
All right. Okay, I will go ahead and talk about Magical Mystery Tour.
Yeah, let's freaking go. I love it.
So you mentioned the flow between songs. Magical Mystery Tour does that, I would say, the second best of any other of any Beatles album, and the first best at flow between songs is the one that you just put at number three. um Magical Mystery Tour is really like a journey for side A, and I find it to be um always a listen all the way through, absolutely nothing skippable. This album is a bit different than an album, of course, because it's meant to sort of soundtrack an experience or some film that they made that I also haven't seen. Maybe it's all right, maybe it's not. But this, earlier I was talking about Glass Onion on White Album being kind of like Beatles, like it references back to things and stuff. And definitely the Fool on the Hill, track 2 of Magical Mystery Tour is like that as well. And so I really enjoy that. You know, of course, you go in from like sort of that introductory Magical Mystery Tour track into the Fool on the Hill, and it's really kind of setting up some kind of narrative about the Beatles. It's really fun. And then we're flying, and I think that this interlude um is essential. I mean, it's bizarre in the right way, and it definitely is meant to be sort of cinematic, and I take it that way. And then you have Blue Jay Way, which I think is quite good. And then you have Your Mother Should Know, which I think is a pretty like kind of like awesome song. And then you just have a I Am the Walrus and then a bunch of singles, which is completely untouchable. And so it's cinematic for a while. And then it's just like, now that we've got your attention, boom, 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 boom. And so this album is definitely not a traditional album experience. You know, in a way, it's just kind of a bunch of tacked on hits there at the end of the album. You know, so sort of stuff that was not on an album before, and they just put it here. Um, it's interesting that the guy wanted Strawberry Fields Forever to be on Sergeant Pepper's and not Magical Mystery Tour, called it the worst mistake of his career. Like you said, I did not know that. I definitely think that it is a great piece of Magical Mystery Tour because of the sort of cinematic element of it. But I mean, if it was on Sergeant Pepper, that fits just as well too. You know, that I could kind of see that. But I think it's cinematic and kind of paints a world, and that's one thing that I like about Magical Mystery Tour. So I think that it fits well here. One thing that I will say is, you know, all these kind of hits were just tacked on to the B side of the album, but I think it still flows actually really well. You know, I think there was some effort put in to make it not just sound tacked on like that. You know, I think that at least the sequencing, you know, whatever decisions were made there, I think were really, really good. And so it doesn't come across in a compilation sort of way. It comes across like an album. And, you know, I really like the whole side A. It's all cinematic, and then it leads up to this I Am the Walrus, and it's one of the best Beatles songs ever. And like you said, it means absolutely nothing, and it is endlessly fascinating. And so many of the coolest experiments sonically that the Beatles have ever done are not only on I Am the Walrus, but on side A of this album. And also, of course, Strawberry Fields, you know, there's the phasing. You know, there's a lot of that really interesting, like playing with the studio like an instrument thing that they start doing there in 67, really. You could say 66, I guess. Um, you know, it's a beautiful trip of an album that I really enjoy listening to. And I guess I kind of understand why people put it low. But the reasons that people put it low, you know, like it's just thrown together, and then some of the like experiments they don't really sell to people. To me, it's just like cinematic, but then the stuff that they throw on at the end, it still sounds like an album to me. I've just never heard it in the way that these other people hear it. You know, I just think it's absolutely terrific, and it's that kind of same sound palette as Sergeant Pepper, which is an album that I obviously love because it's yet to come on my list. Um, and maybe that's a good segue for you to talk about Sergeant Pepper.
Ooh, interesting. Okay, so Sergeant Pepper's. Um, ooh, here it is.
Oh yeah,
And one of my favorite records. I got this from my aunt and uncle. I'll give them a shout out. Their names are Linda and Mark. Ready? So cool. And you talk and so this kind of has the same problem as Abbey Road, where it's like, what do I say about this that hasn't been said like 100 million times? Like I could talk about the album cover. The album cover is perfect, but like, yeah, everyone knows that. Like it's the most famous, but it really is that good of an album cover, I think. But let's talk about the album itself. Oh, my records are falling over. Okay, cool. Well, anyway, Sergeant Pepper's. There's some people say this is the single best album of all time. Rolling Stone magazine for years, they do their 500 albums list. They put this at number one for like a long time. I wouldn't go that far. And as you can see, it isn't even my favorite Beatles album, but like, yeah, I totally get it. This is a blast. I'll kind of go into some of the, in an effort to come up with something original, talk about some of my personal favorites and why. With a little help from my friends, is my favorite Beatles song. I think everything about this song is perfect. I mean, you've got Ringo singing, you've got the drums, the groove, the bass, the piano, the guitar hits, the backing vocals, and this song's like 2 minutes, and every second of the song is just like it's amazing. It's really yeah, I it's always been my favorite Beatles song ever as long as I can remember, and still is. Um, like you really have, even if it's not like my personal favorite album ever, you really do have some of the best songs ever made on here. You got, Lovely Rita Meter Maid, so good. You got obviously Day in the Life. Again, what can I even say? But Day in the Life is, you've got the orchestra build up, and then the just stops. Dun, 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 wake up, get out of bed, and then the bass and piano, boom, boom, boom. And apparently they didn't know how to conduct the orchestra, so they said, they kind of got everything together, and they're like, you have this many measures or this many bars to reach this note, and then the band just went with it, and that was the big musical build up, or that breakdown. Good morning is so out of control. Like every second of the song is like, again, it's like, what the heck? Like the and it hits that drum hit, like that is so sick. Like every time I hear that, I'm like, game over. I'm just gone. It's real. It's real creative, but like it's so smart. It's like, what again? What even is this? I don't. And then I mean, I could go on and on. You got, it's just the whole album. My point here is, this album is just musical excitement. I think that's why everyone kind of gravitates to it. And you got all your little songs of Getting Better, Fixing the Hole, She's Leaving Home, When I'm 64. Like the whole thing is just Sergeant Pepper's. I could go on and just fangirling about this all day, but like and also the CD. So the record is from my aunt and uncle. The CD I actually got from my grandparents. They normally give me records, but they give me CDs this time, because my grandpa, he had multiple copies of this, and he had like the remastered definitive edition or something, so he gave me a different one. So that was really real nice of them as well. My family members are just killing it. I guess they just give me lots of great stuff and it's kind of nice they don't want these things anymore, because I take them and I put them on my shelf. Yeah, that's yeah, Sergeant Pepper's. I think I'll leave it at that.
Your grandparents with vinyl and CDs are sort of like me with t-shirts, because if I ever like have this t-shirt and then I like can't wear it or something, like it gets washed so it shrinks a little bit, it's like, hey Joe, you want this shirt?
Yeah, just
It's
reboot off of people.
yeah, it's similar.
Yeah.
Well, your thoughts on Sergeant Pepper's, of course, were something that I agree with massively. Um, there's a whole lot to be said about why that album is so good, and I would like to get there in the future, because of course I still haven't mentioned it. Um, there's one thing that I really want to say, and I'm really holding my tongue very strongly. Uh,
Uh-oh.
as like a response to what you said, but I will just wait. And the reason I will wait is because Sergeant Pepper's is my number one album.
Oh,
So here we go with Abbey Road at number two. What's your number two?
my number two is Rubber Soul.
Okay. All right. The trick is deciding which one of us should go first here, because we've already talked about both of these. You know what, I will say I'll go first, because this take that apparently Help and Rubber Soul are the best two Beatles albums, that's very interesting. Putting Abbey Road and Sergeant Pepper's as the top two is not interesting at all. Like, you might as well just tune me out. So I'm gonna go ahead and go first, and then it looks like you have some takes ahead. And so first of all, we go with Abbey Road. Track one has Come Together, and I happen to be a drummer.
That's all
This
you
is
need.
this is an unbelievably great drum part. It's so unique and I would say bold as well. Like who plays like that? Who, you know? And then you have Something, which is so beautiful. I think that the tones, the way that everything sounds on Something, it's all very perfect. And so I'm 2 tracks into the album, and here is because I was talking earlier about Abbey Road. It's like what can I say that hasn't just like what's kind of like personal, like an observation to me, because everything that's been said has already been said. What I will say about Abbey Road is that in terms of like the musicians of the Beatles, like their ability to play, it's the best on Abbey Road. They are doing things on Abbey Road that's like, wow, they're all like very respectable musicians. Also, the songwriting is brilliant all over the thing. And you have so much ambition. And Something is is really nice. And even in terms like just let it play on the radio and like Come Together, a song that sounds like that being a radio hit. Very interesting. Um See, this is the kind of stuff that like only the Beatles can do. Like I was talking earlier about how like Revolution Number 9 on the White Album, it doesn't sell you at all and it just tries to rely on being the Beatles and it's egotistical. Come Together being a radio hit is also egotistical, but to be honest, that's worthy praise, really, because that song should be a huge hit. And the Beatles are the ones who said, we're going to make this really weird song and it's going to be huge. And it sure is. Um, Now, of course, you have Maxwell Silverhammer, which I also tend to really, really like, and it's nice to hear that you really like it. It's I was cool to hear you mentioned about the bass kind of doing all the octave jumps and being pretty busy, and that would be just another example of kind of the instrumental prowess of these guys and how they throw it together on Abbey Road in a really cool way. I mean, they're really cooking up some parts here on this album. Oh, Darling, great song. Octopus's Garden, Ringo song, really cool. I Want You, She's So Heavy. This song is like awesome. And then you have Here Comes the Sun, which I think people kind of gawk at a little bit because maybe it's a little corny or cheesy or whatever for some people's taste, but of course it's a brilliant song. And I mean, you went into a little bit of the instrumental depth. You went with like the Wurlitzer part. Um, Gosh, I mean, Here Comes the Sun is it's nothing conventional. It kind of defined a convention, if you want to say it that way. Okay, so our recording stopped and I was just talking about Here Comes the Sun. Then you have Because and You Never Give Me Your Money. Like great song, Sun King, interesting and cool. You got all this like stuff that's supposed to go all together. There's just nice like multi-movement, interesting thing that I can't really tell what it's about. In particular, Polyphene Pan. Very odd set of lyrics. There's much to be discovered for me about that. This whole like kind of medley section. The end, holy cow, it's brilliant. And Her Majesty. I mean, this album is front to back, and I love to listen to it. It's definitely nice. Whenever we were kind of ranking these albums, it's like, well, I know this one's going to go near the top, and so kind of helped me organize my thoughts because you can't like Abbey Road can't be too low. Like for you, you've got it at number 4. To me, that's pretty reasonable. I mean, Rubber Soul and Help are interesting things to put above it, to be sure. That's a take, but obviously you've got it high. I think I would really be interested to see if some people who rank the Beatles albums put Abbey Road much lower. It's a great album, really, really awesome. It's probably ubiquitous, but I don't know what ubiquitous means.
I don't either.
Yeah. Um, okay. Now that I'm finished talking about I basically just went track by track. I mean, but I did my one take is instrumentals here are absolutely peak. These dudes are playing their butts off. The songs are very well written. There's plenty of experimenting, plenty of things that have never been heard until this album came out. I mean, just ridiculously good album. All-time classic, it's just really high up there in terms of a historically important album and just important to me. Okay, you have Rubber Soul at number 2.
I do.
All
Yep.
right.
Ready?
Justify this.
Rubber Soul.
Oh yeah, I got to show Abbey Road.
Oh yeah, there it is. And then did you have more to show? I don't remember if you showed your little things.
No, because I don't have Magical Mystery Tour for some reason.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then I have shout out to the
Cool.
Kathy and Grandpa Bob again. This is the USA version of this particular Rubber Soul. Okay, so
In my opinion, by the way, Rubber Soul is the best Beatles album cover.
it's a good one. Yeah.
What do you like the best? Probably Sergeant Pepper, I think.
Probably Sergeant Pepper's,
Mhm.
but yeah, I've never thought about like ranking album covers, but yeah, Rubber Soul would be up there.
Yeah.
It's and you can already it's funny because like you get into more experimental stuff, can already tell like this album is going to be a little different
Yeah,
than
definitely.
whatever else they're doing. So
Sweet
earlier,
name of an album too.
mhm,
Rubber
yeah,
Soul. That's
Rubber
so cool.
Soul, yeah, like shoes, but it's also like soulful. You guys, it's
Oh,
nice.
okay. Like shoes.
Well,
Right.
it's not what it's the reference to, like soul. Like I could be wrong, but I thought it was a reference to SOLE, soul, but it was also like the rubber
Maybe.
on your shoe, but it's also just like rubber soul because it's like
Yeah, I guess that might be a reference to that.
maybe I think I heard that like or something like that a long time ago. I didn't fact check it recently, but yeah, that's your rubber soul. Okay, so earlier I talked about the vocals on the song "If I Fell" from Hard Day's Night and how that was totally like mind blowing and crazy. So Rubber Soul for me, Rubber Soul is basically that, but for like an entire album where every song is this like layers and layers and layers of vocals, and they're it's like folk sounding, but it's also like psychedelic sounding, but it's not really like completely either, but it does both really freaking well. It really it's just real, and I would say this is probably one of the ones that really got me into the Beatles, like at least from an album standpoint. But I mean, song like Norwegian Wood with the I once had a girl, or did I say you once had me? It's easier for me to just try and sing. It's how cool these little melodies are, and they start like the sitar on this. Nowhere Man. I mean, I'd say again, you talk about the Beatles doing their own thing. I like you hear Nowhere Man, you're like, that's a Beatles song. Like, man, it's that song is. I remember hearing that on the radio as a kid and being like, or I might have been in like middle school, and I was like so sad. I'm like, wow, that's just and just like Nowhere Man. But like, okay, so back to vocals. I guess that these the way they sing really elevates this music, and people talk about being it's transcendent, it's all this crazy stuff, but it just really is. It's so fascinating, it's unreal. You get like this like chorus effect where they're all singing, and then there's a single line that will like depart or sing something else, and they all like come back in together. You got like The Word, which is like super hazing, Ringo singing What Goes On, which is like a little more of a bouncy, more kind of a road tripping song. In My Life, you mentioned that one. In My Life, to me, it's like the quintessential Beatles song. Like you think of you think of the Beatles, you're gonna think of a song like In My Life. I mean, with that organ solo, just really, it's quick and it's cutesy, but like, and it's just like it's so ridiculous. If I Needed Someone, I mean, the layers of the guitars on this, and just the whole overall, I guess, blend of this album, how everything really it does all this stuff, but it feels effortless. It's really involved, but also really accessible at the same time. And I would say if you haven't listened to the Beatles for some reason, if you've been living under a rock, I would say start with this one. because
Hmm.
it's and I mean that's obviously an easy choice because it's that line between 65 between your early albums and then your other, weird stuff. But I think this album is just like, and I don't even know, like, what do I say I haven't already said? It's wonderful. It's a really really nice listen. So that's my second place is Rubber Soul.
Yeah, it's definitely very good. I like that you pointed out some of those strange melody writing, and then also it's very crafty singing. It's like you said, they'll all come out and then they'll all come back in together. It's very crafty the way they kind of arrange their vocal parts. And I remember the first time that kind of really popped out to me is when I was playing the Rock Band Beatles game. Um, some of the stuff um to sing on Rubber Soul that's in the game is like very like, because in that game you can sing multiple parts, multiple
Oh
vocal
yeah. How
parts.
do you decide which part?
Yeah, I don't
Especially on these
remember
songs.
really, but it's I remember thinking it's like I can see why they did that, because some of these songs on, that it does that kind of thing that you're describing. It's like just crafty singing between the four guys. And but yeah, some of those melodies are seriously really amazing. So I think that's very good to point out. Um yeah, Nowhere Man. Yeah, I probably could have mentioned that earlier. You heard it on the radio, and you said that was maybe the first time you've heard it. Is that right?
The first time I heard that song, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, yeah, that's nice. Okay, let's do our number ones. Um, let's see. For you, it is Help, and for me, it's Sergeant Pepper. I'll go ahead and do Sergeant Pepper. Um, it's a lot of people's number one. It's not. It's pretty cool take there. Um, okay, now that I'm talking about Sergeant Pepper, I'll say the thing that I wanted to say earlier. I was like, I'm really holding my tongue. Here's what I'm really holding my tongue to say. So I've talked about a lot of songs that are like perfect Beatles songs, some of the best Beatles songs ever. I've said things like that as we go here. A lot of S tier songs, like every song so far that I've said, one of the best Beatles songs ever. Those would be like S tier Beatles songs, let's say. Like on a tier list, there'd be S tier. Good morning is double S.
Yeah.
It's it's an 11 out of 10. That song singularly uh
Is that
it's
your favorite?
it's my favorite Beatles song ever.
It's a good
It's
one.
one of my very favorite songs ever. Um it's very interesting. I've kind of played around with this song a little bit. Like when I listen to it, I'll sit there and listen to it multiple times in a row, and I'll just kind of think about it. It's like, what were they even thinking when they chose to do that? You mentioned that you called it a drum hit. It's like that thing. Excellent. What a cool decision. Um, that's just so neat. And then there's like all these different horn parts. There's like the cockle doodle doos thrown in. There's all these different sampled sounds, which that'll lead to a discussion about this album as a whole here in a minute. Um, different instruments used on this song. Good morning, good morning. The guitar solo in this song is completely unhinged. It the sound of it itself, it's that very like distorted, and the way it just kind of like a song like this, da, 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 and then they put the nastiest guitar solo, and it's so genius. It, it's like, to me, this song is just a complete trip. Um, it is if you it's kind of like an endless source of inspiration for me. Like if I'm trying to think, like, wow, like it's just one of the most inspiring, creative, artistic, totally bananas songs. I've heard it said before that most people who try to like write sheet music out for this song disagree on how to do it.
Yeah.
People will like well, you should write it this way. No, you should actually write it this way. Um, and I've thought about how I would do it before, you know. And it's like, because this song, if you're trying to like really think about how to write it out, it presents some problems, you know. And I would say that probably how the Beatles were thinking about this song in particular is not as much the sheet music thing. They were kind of just like coming up with ideas. And then somebody's like, well, what if we just did it like this? And then everyone's like, yeah, that'll work. And then they did it like that. And every time they made some weird decision like that in this very organic process of making this song, uh, you know, it every time it was just another unconventional thing stacked on top of another unconventional thing. And then you remember that this came out in 1967, unbelievably ahead of its time with the weird studio techniques, the tape manipulations and the sampling and the crazy guitar solo over this like bizarre uppity kind of tasteless kind of thing. It's sort of like the Captain Beefheart of the Beatles.
Yeah.
You could also say that about the everybody's got something to hide except me and my monkey. I think there's something to be said about that one in that respect as well. But good morning, good morning. That's just a whole other way of thinking. And it's very crazy that the Beatles did this song. I mean, it sounds like a Beatles song, it sure does, but it's just totally nothing like anything they did. You know, it's very singular. And so double S tier song, one of the most important songs that I've ever heard, or like just for me, it's just endlessly inspiring. Listening to that song, it's like, wow, music can really be interesting. You so that's that song. Very intense love for that song. Um, then you just have the album as a whole, right? And when I put this album on, it's definitely sort of a cinematic thing, sort of like the Magical Mystery Tour. This album does it better. It's true. The flow of songs is really good on this album. There's these different themes, and they're all very psychedelic, and I'm not sure exactly what people are thinking, but they probably aren't either. And, that's how this album came together. They were under certain influences of certain substances and whatever. And, that can definitely lead to different ways of thinking. And you get an album like this that is totally full of precious gems of songs, one after the other. Um, I mean, I'm just like looking at the track list right now. It's difficult to decide even a place to start, you know. And I don't just want to go through the track list like I've been doing for the other ones because I'll go on a tangent about most things on this album. I will also say that this album, compared to the other Beatles albums, is the album that I know the best. It's the one that I really kind of like every detail is kind of like to me. Like I just really have a lot to pay attention to and a lot of things that I've just kind of thought of. This is I cannot play this album if I'm trying to do something. Like for example, sometimes when I'm at work, I'll put a headphone in and I'll listen to music. Can't do that with this one. Really can't. Um, and I describe myself as a person who has kind of like the opposite of ADD. Like I don't have this like, whoop, squirrel. Like I'm like walking Adderall. I have tunnel vision is more how I would describe myself. And when I listen to music while I work and stuff, generally that's okay. Like I can focus and I can listen to music and I can work. And I'm a drummer, so I'm a pretty good multitasker. So I can even pay attention to the music even while I work sometimes. Stuff like that can happen. I can't do that with Sergeant Pepper at all. Way too much wants my attention and like it makes me think. It's such a rich experience. It's totally loaded with details. They spend all this time in the studio. Totally brilliant record. And of course there's so much about it that's trippy. There's so much about it that's like really gnarly, so much that is very beautiful and serene. And then there's stuff that's just totally out of pocket as well. Like kind of the just totally tasteless. Like they're not making a pop song. It's like John Philip Sousa on LSD sometimes or whatever, and it's like they're just apologizing for absolutely nothing. They're already the Beatles. They don't care how this album is going to be received. What they're trying to do is make art. And I do think that kind of like I was saying, it's an ego move. Like we're the Beatles, we can do anything. And then they came out with this album and proved that they really can. Um, I talked about the White Album and some of that stuff earlier. I don't think they put as much into that one. But I think with this, Sergeant Pepper's, I think this is their most art project album. And that's kind of what I look for in music generally. It's like what's just really trying to be good art, very creative, really doing something, pushing the boundaries, kind of a game changer. That's kind of generally my taste in music. I don't have much of like genre alliance or whatever. And this album, it's totally killer. There is no filler. And the stuff that people might consider filler, like certain interludes or whatever, to me is totally essential to the experience. Like some people might say that the Mr. Kite song, what's it called? Being for the benefit of Mr. Kite. People can say that's skippable. To me, never. Nope. I want that in there. There is this thing's just chock full. So yeah, absolutely ambitious, grand endeavor. I will never stop getting new stuff out of this album. Um, that's kind of what I have to say about Sergeant Pepper. I'm sure there's about a billion people in the world who could say the same thing. But yeah, in particular, the album, it goes through track and track and track. It's this whole experience, and it would probably still be my favorite Beatles album, even if it did not have Good Morning, Good Morning. But what's crazy is that it holds the punch. It's not the second. I guess it's the third to last track on the album. You go through this whole album and it's so amazing, and then you get Good Morning, Good Morning, and you're already floored. It's like you've been just plowed over by some amazing music, and then you just get freaking like stampeded on. In the album experience, it's like, dang, this album's so good. And then Good Morning, Good Morning happens, and then it's that like reprise of Sergeant Pepper, and then it's A Day in the Life, which is like a completely gorgeous song, and then it has that like transition there where it gets faster, and it's like this album is so good. Um, a lot of details, and it's yeah, it's very ambitious. So those are kind of some of my thoughts on my favorite Beatles album. I would say, like, as much as I really like all of the Beatles albums, I think that this one is easily my favorite. I don't think it's any contest. I definitely knew what number one was before I started this process of ranking them. And okay, let's hear about your number one, which is Help.
I love real quick. I love you mentioning the last three, like, and you're totally right. Like the album is already like top notch is up here, and then you're just like, good morning, reprise, day in the life.
It's nuts.
Like, it's sweet.
Mm-hmm. It's nuts.
I'm holding the CD up right now, and also, you get your little more stuff that people tend to not like as much. The two I'm referencing are Benefit of Mr. Kite and Within You Without You. But for me, I think those are still essential to the album as a whole. Like there's not a single one on here that I'd be like, oh, I could skip that one, or maybe I could think of that. Like, I mean, even, because Within You Without You is not a go-to. I still like it a lot. It's not a go-to for me, but like, would I ever skip it in the album? No, heck no.
The way I might describe what you're saying now, because I totally agree with you, of course, the way I would describe it is this album has me fully invested in this creative vision. I wish there was like stuff like For the Benefit of Mr. Kite. I wish there was stuff like that between every song on the album. I want more and more and more of this like cinematic universe that they're
Right,
portraying
right.
on the album. I want as much as humanly possible. I'm very invested. And so I would say that that's maybe like my reason that those things are essential. That's how I would say it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. Okay. Um, so Help. Yes, I did put an early Beatles album at number one. Ready? Here it is.
Mm.
Help. When you need help, exclamation point. And then, oh, there it is. Heck yeah. Amen. Looking nice. And then, okay, so bet you can't guess what's coming next. You ready? So I got this. And then, but wait, there's more. You got it again. So one of these was for my I don't remember which is which, but one was for my grandparents and one was for my dad. But they're this again, the USA version has like in the USA version honestly isn't as great because it's just got these like orchestral instrumentals from the movie. I haven't seen the movie, so that might be good, but I don't know. I've only seen the Hard Day's Night movie, I guess. Which maybe it's time to go look for some more Beatles movies. But anyway,
Hey, Joe, let me interrupt you right there. Um, it's safe to say, I mean, you have this album quite a bit. It's safe to say you need some assistance.
oh, you guys.
Yeah. Stop it. Get some assistance.
Wait, hold on. I need you to I need you to say that sentence again real quick.
Stop it. Get some assistance.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, yeah. So I need some help with all this. Okay, so help. Um, so my affection towards early Beatles songs. For me, what really put this at number one is this album. This has it all. I mean, it's happy, it's sad, it's fun, it's exciting, it's got the melancholy, it's got everything you could ever want in an album, and they did it in like 33 minutes. I mean, what really puts this so high for me is the songwriting and how everything is it's so simple, yet it's so expertly crafted. I mean, you've got stuff like, of course, the song Help. And it's like you with Sergeant Pepper's, or I guess me with Sergeant Pepper's. I could go through everything, Hide Your Love Away, I Need You
Awesome
with
song.
like the guitar pedal. I think it's
Mm.
either guitar and organ. I'm not sure, but it's like wow, 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 and it's like what, like, and again, it's not super out there by any means, but it's so beautiful. I mean, this is their album before they made Rubber Soul and started tripping out. So this is their peak of songwriting where they're just writing hits, just good song after good song without doing anything too crazy. Not that the crazy stuff is bad, keep in mind, you look at my second, third, and fourth albums, I put those albums really high as well. Like, man, and there's also there's this whole country kind of influence on it. You got like the acoustic guitars, the steel guitars. You got Ringo singing the country cover, this like storytelling type singing, the organs, the pedals I mentioned, the flutes, more varied percussion and everything. But I don't, like I said, I don't really like country music in general. I don't know a lot of country music, to be honest, but it's just so inexplainably fun. I mean, a song like Ticket to Ride, that's kind of like the center point of this album, and the guitar arpeggios, it's like, oh my gosh, like and it's only love, I get high when I see you go by, like that one line, like like that melody, he's like just skipping like in thirds or something like that one. It's infectious, it's a hook, but it's just like, man. Of course, I mean, Tyler mentioned Yesterday. What I think you gotta hide your love away is the other one he said. Like, you like me too much, tell me what you I mean, every single song on here is like, it's just, and I still got to defend myself here because, like, keep in mind, you're going against albums like Abbey Road and Sergeant Pepper's. Like, I really have to explain how this album is like number one. And when you're going up against all these cinematic universe, like Magical Mystery Tour and Sergeant Pepper's, where it really is this artistic experience. So how do I put an album like Help, like, up against all these, like, just gigantic megawatt, powerhouse albums? For me, what really did it is that, you talk about these albums being um you talk about them being like, classics, or these albums, we'll be thinking about this another 50 years from now, we'll be teaching this or whatever. And that's great. And I agree with with some of these, absolutely. But for me, I think these songs are timeless. I mean, the emotional weight and the emotional strength on this, you could listen to this in 1965, you could listen to this in 2023. Doesn't matter. I think it still holds the same level of just pop music, but also super like high key emotional importance. I mean, and also it came down to me, I looked at like all these albums, and I'm like, the one I just kept going back to again and again and again for like songs that are just, they just hit you again and again, was this one here. Um Man, I mean, what else do I say where I'm not just like just fangirling or just losing my mind, how excited this thing makes me. And it's like, and also you think about all the other early Beatles albums where it's like, with everything was building. And well, actually maybe that's not true, because I put Please Please Me higher than With the Beatles. So if we ignore With the Beatles, you get Please Please Me, Hard Day's Night, Beatles for Sale, which I love, Beatles for Sale, and then Help. And it's just like you get to that and you're like, bam, like you're there. And this was like, it's the songwriting. It's just like the whole thing. It's legendary. I love all of it. And I think I'm gonna be listening to this for a long time. And yeah, those are my thoughts on Help, on this number one Beatles album.
Very cool. Makes me want to kind of go back to it and think about some of that, like yeah, I mean the country is fun, definitely. It's they're doing some different things here, and then also it's kind of like you said. I mean, there's just the moments of pure genius here. It's just magical. And well, cool. So those are our lists. I guess one more thing that I felt like saying was there are a lot of um non-album Beatles songs that are very, very good. I pulled up a list here on my phone just so I could kind of name some of them off. For example, Day Tripper never made an album. I believe that one came out in 66, right around that time. Don't know how that didn't make an album. So such a good
Day Tripper
song.
rocks.
Yeah,
Really
that
good.
riff, that's ridiculous. I Want to Hold Your Hand never made an album. She Loves You never made an album. Lady Madonna, Paperback Writer, Hey Jude, which is a really popular song that I just think is like decent. I think it's a decent song. But and then also we were talking about the White Album earlier, and in a bit of evidence, a bit of proof that it is undercooked at certain points is the version of Revolution that came out later. That's a bit faster than the Revolution 1 that came out on the White Album, which is way worse. The version of Revolution that came out later is so awesome. And all right, it's gnarly. And of course there's plenty more. I Feel Fine. There's it's very interesting that these never made albums, and there's several of them, and so I just think that they're worth mentioning because they're just such great Beatles songs. But
Yeah, and I think I love Day Tripper, of course. I think my other favorite, at least favorite, that's kind of stuck in my head of the ones you just mentioned is Paperback Writer. And they're it's like the song, it's same as Day Tripper, the song just kicks off. I don't know if you have more to say, but I really like what you said about non-album singles, because bear with me. I just have a few more things I want to show and tell, and I think they are essential. I think they are important. So this is one that oh wait, oh never mind. I thought we lost the meeting, but it's just out of our little
I
listing.
figured since you're playing show and tell, let's
Oh
just
yeah, you want to see me up close?
yeah.
So this is one that I bought. This is the Beatles. This is their Red album. This is their compilation from 62 to 66, and it's two albums. And then there's another one that you can't guess the other one. So this is one that my dad bought and gave to me. It's the other one. It's the blue one. And I don't normally go for like greatest hits in general, but like these, like absolutely, because it was part of it. I don't know. Part of it was like the non-album singles, and also part of it was just like it's Beatles Red and Blue. It's just great. And then other. I was gonna tie this into Abbey Road, but I forgot. But whatever. So this is Beatles. It says Past Masters Volume 2, but when you open it, I don't know if you can tell, but when you open it, it's Yellow Submarine. I found this at an antique store and it was $1, and I was like, it's Yellow Submarine. Like that's great. And last thing, this is my most recent acquisition. And I'm still blown away I found this. So this is them live on the radio in the early 60s. This was 50 cents. There's 2 discs. And I think the reason it's 50 cents is it's really cracked on the back here. And there's like paint on the front and I had to like clean off. But the discs themselves are like fine. And so I was like, I saw that in the 50-cent bin. And I was like, why is that there? But yeah, Beatles. I should have said this. Beatles live at the BBC, which is this one here. And now I'm finally done with show and tell.
That's
Those are the things that all the things that I own. I've just jam packed today. But yeah, lots of good stuff, and I really like all the stuff that my, I've bought, but also stuff that my family has given me because I'm really appreciative of the all their old stuff that I've been able to take on and continue listening to.
yeah, it's a sweet collection, man. Very cool. You know, old stuff. That's neat. Passed down. That's cool. Yeah, I know my grandparents. They have a copy of Meet the Beatles. They have a copy of that one. It's still theirs. But
Maybe they'll give it to you
yeah, someday.
for it. Tag
Well,
them.
yeah, I guess so. Will it to me. They're both young though, so maybe
Dang
when
it.
I'm 50, they'll be 100. And no, I don't know. They're doing great. Um, gosh, let's see. And I'm happy they're alive. Very happy. um, yeah. So when the time comes, record collection would be cool. I'll, but wow, this is morbid. So thanks for watching the
Thanks
video.
for watching, everyone.
It's been very fun to hang out with Joe and talk about the Beatles on this series of Zoom meetings that we're compiling into this however long video. Yep. So thank you for sticking with us. Hope it was cool. See you in another video sometime.